Welcome to Booked All Night, the podcast for book lovers and storytellers who stay up all night consuming everything between the pages of a good book. I'm your host, Jessica Mary, and I'm joined weekly by Leigh and Magdalyn Ann as we geek out over books and the craft of writing them. This week, we're finishing up our discussion on Death at Mourning House by MAUREEN Johnson, which, by the time this episode airs, should be published already. This is your spoiler warning. We will be talking about the whole book today, so if you have not read Death at Mourning House, but to the end, turn back now or have it spoiled. Alright, my little Libernauts, buckle up, settle in, and let's launch this literary discussion together. Alright, so last week we didn't talk about Chris's sexual escapades, and I didn't even realize it until I was cutting the episode. And in the first 10 chapter discussion we had, we kept alluding to it, but we couldn't talk about it because it wasn't part of that. And I want to talk about that before we get into our actual final discussion of the whole book, with a big focus on this wild and crazy ending that happened in Death at Mourning House. So, Chris, slept with, the whole town?
And even people outside of the town.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, a whole bunch of tourists.
Yes.
Too.
And the only people he did not sleep with is our main girl and Riki.
But Riki tried, but that was because Riki was setting him up to show Liani. Yes, Liani. Riki had set up the whole video to catch Chris being a cheater, because nobody cared that he slept around, but he was in an active relationship with Liani, and she was not really into having an open relationship, and so it wasn't something that he had talked to her about, so it was cheating. And
I think Riki caught it because she heard tourists over talking about how the one girl hooked up with this guy, and she described him, and it was Chris.
Yeah. And
so clearly the message here is sex kills.
Yes, obviously. The only way to not get killed is not to have sex. A public service announcement from Booked All Night. I liked the build-up of it, that all of the characters were kind of ashamed of his sexual history, or at least the breadth of it.
Right, yes. And they all knew. They all knew. And I don't think he slept with Tom either, because I think Tom is straight.
Right. Tom's the only other one, I think, because he did sleep with Van.
Yes.
That's why Van and Liani go off and mourn together, because they were both sleeping with him at the time that he was pushed over the edge. And that is really cool, because that comes back to why Dr. Henson got murdered, rolled up into a tarp, and Cecil hoteled into the bathroom. Why am I laughing?
But wasn't he dating Van and not Liani at the time of his death?
Yeah.
Oh,
because they went to prom together, yeah.
Yes.
So him and Liani were already broken up. Yes. However, they were cool. Her and Van were cool with each other. Yeah. That's right. Okay.
So they have that party on one of the islands that's not the island that Mourning House is at. It's one of the other old houses that all the kids just kind of take over.
After prom, yeah.
After prom. And there's also part of that in Mourning House, because Dr. Henson shows us up in the attic, and she's like, see, there it is. Whatever. The camera comes back into play for this, and I thought that, the ending just closed up very nice for me, right? So, where to even start? Because the ending of this book was chaos. Just pure chaos.
I think from the moment that the tower got set on fire to the end, it was just non-stop.
Yes.
I did struggle through the opening, the first, maybe 10-ish chapters to, I was just struggling with actually getting through them. But as soon as I got to the fire, I was like, oh, okay, this is happening now. I'm going to buckle in real quick.
Yeah.
Keep your hands and feet inside the plot car at all times.
Yeah.
And it was just so insane and unbelievable. I was just like, this can't be happening. This wouldn't happen. This whole scenario is just let's take this scene to the extreme.
And all of it, the Ralston timeline is chaos, and the current timeline is chaos, and I was just like, most of the time when I read before I go to bed, right? Reading's very relaxing. It puts me to sleep. I get to these chapters and I'm like, uh-oh. Well, I can't stop here. Yeah, like, I'm wide awake and it's 4:00 in the morning and I need to go to bed, but I need to know what happens. And all right. We're gonna start, I think. Well, yeah, right. Did Marlo set another house on fire? What is going on?
She's very adamant that she did not start this one.
Right. Who's back the fire?
I really enjoyed seeing, everyone's lighting up the fireplace during the storm to keep warm, and I'm like, Chekhov's, burning house.
Chekhov's very smoky fireplace.
But the thing that I love the most about those particular chapters, one, Marlo gets accidentally high. And she is hilarious high. But mostly that the juxtaposition between Marlo during this fire and Marlo during the first fire in the opening chapters is night and day. And I just really enjoyed that sort of, she goes from being the one that's sobbing and out of control to the person that's cool, calm, and collected, and all right, we gotta shimmy across the turret to get to the roof to get away from this burning building.
Yes.
If you thought they Mission Impossibled it the first time,
right?
This is like Mission Impossible 4.
Yeah, so there's a hurricane coming in, so they have tried to weatherproof as best they can. They've moved into the house from the basically like student dorm playhouse thing that they've been in. They were then Marlo and Riki were up in Riki's tower. Marlo is high, and like it's obviously her first time ever being high, so it hits her really hard. Somebody drugged her ice cream. I really loved this particular parallel right between that and the Ralstons, right? Because the Ralstons all wake up and they're like, oh my god, somebody drugged me. And that's what happened here, is that somebody kind of drugged everybody. And they can't go down the stairs because the stairs are on fire. So they have to go out into the hurricane from the second story of this turret and shimmy across and jump onto the roof and then jump off of that. And I'm just like, what is happening? And you're right, like Marlo is absolutely hilarious while she's being high. She's got some great lines, like, being high seemed to take a lot of time. It took me 6 hours to get to Riki's room. Like,
I also just want to state how I just really liked how there's times where she's so high that you can just tell she's high, and then other times where she like Maggie said, she knows what she's doing, because if you've ever been like high or drunk and there's an emergency going on, you sober up at times and then you're back to being drunk or high.
Yeah, she definitely has a whole journey, right? Just being high is part of this ending journey. And I think it's great because if she wasn't, her anxiety would have blown through her. So it's a good thing that she's high.
Yeah, you heard it here first, folks. Sex kills, and being high is great for character journeys.
It's important. She was calm because she was high. So Marlo's like, she's high out of her mind. I think it was actually really great that she was, because it kept her anxiety in check. And as Maggie was saying, there were these times that she was just very in control. She knew what to do, and she had the wherewithal to do it. And as Katie had said, it's these sobering moments when an emergency happens, which prior to that, Marlo didn't really have these sobering moments. She had these Scooby-Doo moments, which we're about to go through, as she suspects literally everyone that she's on the island with of murder for various things. The end was just so much, and I'm trying to organize my thoughts to go in order, but everything is so connected to everything else. It's so hard for me to describe this.
Yes, and I know we're probably trying to hold the big reveal to the end.
Yeah, I don't want to be like, blah, blah, blah is the murderer, because we're only 15 minutes into recording, but
Do we want to talk about that opening line in the one chapter on the morning of the deaths at Mourning House? That one killer line that absolutely just had me sitting up in bed like, what?
Oh, okay. All right, yeah. Let's go back to the Ralstons, right? Because we love the Ralstons here at Booked All Night.
We like some of the Ralstons.
We like some of the Ralstons.
We don't mess with eugenicists.
We're denouncing that, and you heard it here first.
Yes. Eugenics is bad, folks. Let's talk about this line. Let's get this here. July 27th, 1932, the morning of the deaths at Mourning House. On the morning Unity Ralston killed her brother Max, she woke early because of the heat. This whole chapter, as well, just crazy. She's like, la la la, drugging my family and the staff.
Just casually being a sociopath.
A psychopath.
Psychopath, yeah. This turned the entire perception of the story on its head for me. Because the entire time I'm in the same boat of, oh, Clara probably did it. We saw her push him into the water.
Yes.
She's been rough with him before. I was 100% on the Clara's the murderer train. And then we get this chapter, and I'm like, well, fudge.
This and her confession to her father after...
The audacity.
Oh my God.
She went to her dad, the audacity, and just like, hey, I fixed our problem for us. Yes. I killed Max.
And Clara. Clara was an accident, but she disagreed with me, so it's okay. Like, what? And
then Daddy Ralston is just like, okay, I'm gonna clean this up. Don't say anything. Don't tell anyone you said this. Don't tell anyone you told me. And we'll be fine.
Right?
Like, F you, man. Just
right?
F you.
And he does that to protect his children because all of the Ralston children are his.
Dun, dun.
My God. That was a reveal.
So there's that section in Aunt Dagmar's letter where she's like, yeah, as the kids grew up, they blatantly looked like you. And she calls him out on it. And he's just like, yeah, I don't care.
He very specifically says, do you enjoy living here, Dagmar? And she's like, well, you have all the money. And yeah, sure. I'll play along.
Yeah, I'm a woman in 1932, so I guess I won't tell everybody that you slept with 6 women while you were away, and then and then took the children that were born.
My God.
Okay, I'm gonna curb us back to Unity Psycho Ralston over here. So the opening line here, she's on the morning Unity Ralston killed her brother Max. She woke early because of the heat, and she goes through and she takes off her bed sheets. They're sticking to her legs, and she washes her face. She rinses it in cold water, and she puts on her white exercise shoes. And she's very calm. She's got a mission to just murder her brother, and she doesn't care. And there is this one quote in here, too, from her father to her, where it's, I'm proud of all my children, but you, Unity, you have always tried so hard to live up to my standards. I feel you and I understand each other. We know that sometimes to do important work, we must have privacy. And he's talking about the desk that he gave her with all the secret compartments, and that's where she hid, a bunch of drugs to then drug the entire household. She's very careful about who gets what dose and what pill is going into what tea and what breakfast and yogurt and such. And then she just watches everybody go to sleep.
And kills her brother without any remorse.
Yeah.
No second thought.
This whole section's got the dosages that she did too, right? So it's 20 grains went in Aunt Dagmar's coffee pot and 50 grains went into each of the pitchers of fresh orange juice, and everyone had different things. So everybody ate the yogurt, and so she put stuff in the yogurt. And I'm like, holy hell!
I love the fact that Aunt Dagmar has the same desk, and she's the one who is just unlocking every compartment.
Mm-hmm. Aunt Dagmar goes later, and she's like, psycho. But she thinks that of Clara at first too. Right, because she's the one that sees Clara take the knife and put it in her lap and take it, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And she watches her one night, and she just stands out. Clara stands outside of Max's room with a knife, and then becomes clear that she's not standing there to, like, contemplate go in and, Game of Thrones slice his head off. Is she standing there because I think Clara already knows that Unity is going to do something.
Mm-hmm.
She has that gut feeling.
Yeah, I think we get actually a line from Clara at some point where she tells Unity, "I have seen the look in your eyes when you look at him."
Mm-hmm.
Like she definitely deduced that something was going to happen between them, and I think the night that she went to go stand guard at his door was also like a night where his nurse was gone or was leaving or was sick or something.
Mm-hmm.
So she was like, if anything's going to happen, it's going to happen tonight. I'm going to go make sure it doesn't happen.
Yep.
Can we also talk about the fact that the whole book before this is set up so that you think Aunt Dagmar is this just mean old maid, basically, who, isn't married and lives with the children, and she's very stern and
is ultimately like a financial burden as well to have her there. Like she's right. Very treated as an unwelcome guest.
Right, and the kids like recognize her as to be the one that makes them follow the rules and all that stuff, kind of like, not a mother figure, but that, she's the mean old aunt. And then she's like literally the only one who fully cares about these children.
Mm-hmm.
And she's smart enough to know what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
The part of her letter where she writes about how much she loves Clara, like the most, like she's the most connected to Clara, and then just after Clara dies, that was heart-wrenching.
Yeah, and she sees herself as their like step-in mother, these children are like my children, because she was the one who was technically raising them before Father Ralston married that the actress.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just loved seeing that letter from Dagmar and just getting to know her.
Yes. And seeing that she cared and was trying to remain distant so that, Dr. Ralston couldn't come in and do something, because she always suspected that he would, and she was very critical of Max and how Max didn't get disciplined and all the other children did.
But yeah, you get this really deep connection with her, and I don't know, it just getting to know her and seeing that she isn't the person we're supposed to, see her as. I just wanted more. Give me more Dagmar.
Give me more Dagmar. I also love that, most of the characters in here end up being not what we are introduced to. Unity, I think, is a big one, because I never suspected Unity. I was definitely on the Clara murdered her brother train, and I was like, if not Clara, then it was an accident and it wasn't murder at all. But if it was definitely Clara, because Clara, when she wakes up, she immediately goes out and jumps into the lagoon, pulls him out. And I'm still not sure how Clara knew that he'd be there. Like, she immediately wakes up and goes.
I was just going to say, I think it's because of the relationship she has with Unity to begin with. They're always kind of at odds, and, like, there's that tension between them. And then she also, like she mentioned, she saw the look in Unity's eyes every time she looked at Max. So Clara decided that if Unity was going to do this, that she would probably pin the blame on her. And where's the best place to do that? Somewhere where Clara excels at, the swimming pool. Ooh. The place where she pushed Max into.
Well, no,
she water.
She didn't push Max into the little lagoon. She pushed Max in. They were on a boat and they were out between the islands. And she was just like, bye.
She already pushed him into the water when she was supposed to teach him how to swim. And that swimming lagoon was literally where Clara was supposed to excel and practice and go to, train for the Olympics. So, I mean, it's the closest place where Unity could walk to and just drown her brother.
Like you do.
Because Unity was also on the boat when she pushed Max off, right? When Clara pushed Max off.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm looking at this scene again, and Unity is the only one that does nothing. She just watched it. So Victory screamed, but Clara held out an arm to keep her from moving. Unity watched, her expression frozen. And then it's only Clara and Victory who are, yelling, shouting, trying to grab Max because he's not swimming. He's just sinking, and Unity's just sitting there, right?
Yeah.
And then even thinking back to the earlier chapters when we were first introduced to the kids, and Clara remarks how Unity's the only one who is so, adhered to the Ralston routine and, wants to impress her dad and all that, in comparison to the rest of the kids, which are sort of starting to get into the rebellion phase, right?
Yes.
And looking back at those scenes now, knowing what we know after, she's killed Max, it's starting to line up. It was details that we missed on the first read through, and that I think was just masterfully done.
Mm-hmm. Do you think maybe that boat ride was where Unity got the idea to drown Max? Maybe she already had the idea to drug everyone, but she didn't know how to go through.
Yeah,
the killing.
I think she's definitely had that idea to drug everyone for a while, because the detail with which she has those doses,
and I'm sure she had to steal those doses in small doses, so that it wouldn't be like, oh hey, where's all this drugging powder.
Yeah, she specifically even goes into town to get it so that her dad doesn't realize that it's missing from his medicine cabinet.
Yeah, like she thinks that out. Unity terrifies me.
Yeah,
she thought so much out, and in contrast to our modern day killer, who was impulsive. As a writer, like these parallels that happen and these contrasts are so fun to talk about, because there's obviously like the same amount of cast members, and they go through, and somebody's good at swimming, and somebody's good at cooking, and somebody drinks, and like they all kind of have their own little vices and things that connect them, but they also act as these lovely like foils. Unity was like, I will plan everything down to how much I think I can get into each person's yogurt and into the orange juice without causing an overdose to anybody in the house, and they should be out by blah, la, 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 and that will give me X amount of time to go take my 4-year-old brother to the water and drown him. And then there is, here it is, the modern day killer, April, who gets who gets into an argument with Chris because he's like, I'm not interested in you. And she's like, you're interested in literally everybody else. And he's like, yeah, but you're, crazy. And I don't want to put myself in crazy, right? Like that's just relationships 101.
And also to add to that, they had relations.
Yes.
So
but she wanted more.
April wanted more, but Chris did not. A lover's friend.
And then she shoved him off the cliff, and he fell. He fell, he died, and it was tragic and traumatic for everybody, which makes sense why they then weren't talking about it when Marlowe got there, because it sounds like it only happened, like, a few months before...
Yeah.
It's realistically not enough time for anybody to get over their friend falling to their death, and especially Liani swims out and gets his body. Like that's going to stay with her forever. There's also Van and him were dating at the time, and so like there's all this trauma and all this commingled trauma together about it. And then Riki came in and she's like, yeah, by the way, somebody died and you're here to replace them, and she just walks out.
I think we do see them still grieving in their own way.
Yes.
Like, Van's always getting high all the time.
The time.
Yes, Riki's just kind of keeping to herself because, her and Liani had a falling out because of the whole, let me try to seduce your boyfriend to show you he's cheating.
Yep.
And then, April still has to be around these people who Chris chose over her.
Oh, feels so bad for April.
And then she was, like, stirring the entire time, like in between everyone involved, like just saying things. Marlo was saying you're a bitch. Marlo was saying you're this and that, and trying to stir the pot and just make more problems for everyone else to maintain that sort of fractured tension.
Yeah. she absolutely just continued to stir things. And it sounds like she was like that beforehand, that this wasn't only something that she did to cover up the fact that she murdered somebody in their friend group, but she was just that person that thrived on there always being a problem.
And they all knew that and dealt with that because they didn't want to break up the friend group. They had known each other since they were little. They knew April was like this, and they're like, well, we've known her since we were younger, so we'll just ignore this.
Yep.
You know how she is. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the section where they finally call her out.
I think after they do that, she's just like, well, I don't like you guys anyway.
Like you anyway, I'll push all of you off a cliff.
And here's the good part about that. Dr. Henderson isn't here to see that either.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah. So the reason that Dr. Henson gets killed is because of the camera and the viewpoint of her yoga spot. Because once you're up there, you can see all the other islands. You can, see, and the camera itself has this amazing zoom on it. And so April thinks that Dr. Henson knows that April is a killer.
And April didn't even know about the whole yoga and camera thing until after Marlo mentioned it. Where, Marlo was like, oh, yeah, Dr. Henson said she wanted me to keep an eye on you guys or something.
Yep.
And that was sort of when she was like, oh, maybe that's when Henson saw that, and, Henson must die.
Yes. And then she goes and she kills Dr. Henson because she thinks that she saw her kill Chris, and then she rolls her body up in a tarp and sticks her in the bathroom in the middle of summer.
Mm-hmm. The second that we got that one tourist complaining about the bathroom smelling, I was like, oh, she's in the pipes. She's over there.
That's what we said last week. We were like, Cecil Hotel. Everybody is bathing in Dr. Henson. Thankfully, Dr. Henson was not actually in the pipes. She was just in the wall.
Yeah.
And that's a good scene, too, when they find that body, because it's during the time that Marlo is high. And so high. And first she suspects Riki, right? Because the camera is in Riki's room. And she can't remember if they grabbed the camera or if the camera wasn't in the room. And she's trying to piece that together. And then Riki is just like, hey, are you okay? And Marlo's like, you're a murderer! Which is the first of this whole chaotic thing going down, because then they, the house is on fire, they run out of the house, and then they run into Van? Who do they run into first? I don't remember.
After the fire or in the tunnel?
After the fire, because when they get into the tunnel, they run into Tom, because Tom's been looking for the secret treasure of Morning House. And so they turn around and Tom's got a sledgehammer. And then she's like, Tom's the murderer. And then he's like, nope, move. And he bashes into the wall. And that's where Dr. Henson's body is.
Because they did the cask of Amontillado.
Yeah.
Dr. Henson.
They just walled her up. And then there's a few other things where they're trying to figure out who murdered Chris. And so they go and they kind of interrogate Leonie and Van. And ultimately, that's when they start to realize that April has just been like, well, nobody likes you, and they want you to eat a can of worms, and she's sleeping with your boyfriend, and her hair is actually green, but she died. She's just spreading all these really crappy rumors, and they're just little things. I think that's the great part about what she's doing, is that it's not like completely out of the realm for what she's doing. She's not coming up and being like, you'll never believe what Van did. Right now he's doing heroin. She's just like, oh, Van must have put stuff in the ice cream, because Van's always doing pot.
Yeah, he literally says, I would never give anything to anyone without their consent. I forget which chapter it's in, but someone gave me an edible. I said, I have been out of it for most of the night. I think it helped me though, because I stayed calm. I didn't give you anything, Van said, holding up his hands. Anyone's welcome, but I would never give anyone anything they didn't ask for.
Yep.
Just going back to Tom, I think another reason they suspected Tom was because his dad has like the whole boat business and is trying to like kind of, run the town, if you will.
Yeah.
And Chris was a big like
environmentalist.
Yes, and he was trying to stop Tom's dad's business. Yeah. And then they see him with a sledgehammer, and he's just like, oh, it must be Tom.
It must be Tom. And then 5 minutes later, it must be Van. And then another 5 minutes later, it must be Liani. And this is the part that, in the other episodes, obviously, it was all very Scooby-Doo, right? Mm-hmm. Who is it? Oh, it's the only other person in the cartoon. But at the same time, I think that really worked, right? Like, the island is secluded. It makes the setting very tight. And while we could suspect tourists, they are ultimately part of the setting. They just kind of come and go. Nobody really sticks out. None of the tourists get names. They're just, shoobies. And so, okay, the list of suspects is here. But at the same time, when Marlowe comes out and she's like, somebody on the island is a murderer, right? Because that's her thought after she finds a tooth that she then touches her own teeth and puts it into lipstick and ultimately, ruins evidence. She's like, somebody on the island with me is a murderer. And I'm like, that's just one tooth, but okay.
I also really love the moment where after she puts the tooth into the lipstick, she calls Akilah and is like, I really loved that lipstick. It's a good color. And Akilah's just like, are you okay?
The whole time she's so worried that someone's like listening or watching her or whatever, and she's like, they can't find the lipstick, yet I'm going to scream this at someone on the phone.
Right. She is the worst hider. So she puts it in the lipstick and then puts the lipstick kind of like, I think she just puts it in her pocket, right?
Yeah. She brings it with her, but she doesn't want anyone to find it.
Right.
She's just not a good detective.
She is not. Until she gets high.
Until she gets high.
So we know that Marlowe didn't murder anyone because she is like the worst suspect. She would just give all the evidence away. It wasn't me in the observatory with the noose. Wink, wink.
Wink.
She just really puts the disaster in Disaster Day.
She does. I can see her playing Clue, looking at all the cards before she goes in the envelope, and then just saying them out loud and being like, I hope nobody understands that it was Mrs. Peacock in the kitchen with the candlestick. Like, she also isn't good at interrogating, right? Like, the moment that she wakes up in Riki's room, she sees the camera, she's like, oh my god, you have the camera, you're the murderer. Like, you don't want to have a conversation before that accusation. You just want to jump straight to, you're a murderer.
Though I think it really makes sense. She's just like a post-high school kid at this point. She has zero life experience outside of her tiny town in Hot Bottoms. And she's not a trained detective. She doesn't have any sort of knowledge outside of maybe watching a true crime series or something like that, or cop shows on TV. So I think it was really refreshing in that, like, you always read the YA murder mysteries and the main character is a prodigy. They're the next Sherlock Holmes. They're a great detective. They know all these things and how to proceed. And then there's just Marlowe, who's a dumb little gay girl who doesn't become good at anything until she's high.
And also, jumping off of that, it also makes sense because she found a tooth and said there was a murder.
Yes. There were so many other things, like we talked about this last week, but there were so many other things that pointed to, nefarious things happening and the murder happening. But it was a tooth that she found that she was like, clearly murder. I'm like, okay, there's like a couple hundred people that come through every day and a whole bunch of kids. You don't think a kid lost a tooth? Like, what? And where she finds it is also where Unity pushed Clara, right?
Yeah.
So like that's another, callback to the Ralstons and I just love the framing of this story so much. It was absolutely.
Speaking of Ralston, should we talk about what the Ralston treasure was? It was buried on the island that Tom was looking for?
Yes.
So Benjamin kind of comes back and he's talking about like all of his siblings and how he remembers everything, and then how they never talked about it after Clara fell.
Yes,
and he talks about like the repercussions of that. Father's heart gave out, Faye's trauma never healed, Edward drank and crashed his car. Unity was swept away in an accident along with Aunt Dagmar. Did the rest, taking William and Victory. The Ralstons were wiped away, leaving Benjamin to hold the truth alone. And he ends up burying a Ziploc bag in a alabaster box, just under the, like, near the patio, I think it was.
Yeah, I found the section where they found that box, and there's a couple letters inside, and it's like, it couldn't be the Ralstons because there's no Ziploc in the 1930s, but
yes,
it was postmarked to Benjamin Ralston in 1995, so he does come back 60 years later. One of the letters is that somebody had found a bunch of letters from their aunt, and they considered giving it to the police because these letters are basically Dagmar's letters, and they're saying like, oh, I know who did that murder, and he's like, but I decided to give it to you, to your family, and you do what you want with it. And that leads us to Dagmar's letters. Oh,
where we find out everything.
Oh my god. So,
like, she was the smart one who wanted to go and get an education, but of course she couldn't. She was not the male in the family. Basically, she couldn't have her own job. She had to rely on her brother for money. All the kids were his, which we've already discussed. Basically, she has a lady lover who she's writing to. And then on top of that, she discusses all of the the deaths of the children that happened up until that time, and we find out that she took her own life and she took Unity down with her, which was the biggest reveal. I think
there are other things in there too that also stuck out to me. I've just found my section, my highlights and stuff, but she talks about when she discovers that the children are definitely his, and the section is, my brother had been a very busy man. All these women had been his lovers. He had been trying to impregnate them. He tracked it like a good scientist, like a good eugenicist. I could envision him hurrying across town each night for his assignations, or afternoons perhaps, considering that sometimes he had several per day. Yeah, I was like, oh my god, man. And then she calls him out, right? Like, oh, it's strange how the children take after you and each other in some respects. And I should imagine they do. They eat the same good diet, live under the same roof, blah, blah, blah. He's like, And his next thing, after she's like, yeah, all that makes them look the same, does it? He's like, oh, are you happy here?
And my thing is maybe, because I don't think she knows this, but what did he actually do and say to the mothers to get custody? Did he kill them? Did he, say, I'll pay you off to take the children, Yeah,
did he just take them?
Did he just take them? Because, like, he's, working in these medical situations where he is delivering these babies, and he's just like, oh, well, you can't afford a kid on your own, can you? Like, I'll take them, but maybe that's not what actually happened.
Yeah.
We don't. I mean, the explanation we're given at the beginning is that this is the middle of the First World War, or the end of the First World War, and these are women who didn't have husbands to support them, and brand new babies in this ruined city. And he probably just was like, I can give them a better life, you have a choice. You can struggle, or you can take this money and I'll take your baby. Or maybe it was even like a discussion they had beforehand, perhaps, like, they were all eugenicists and they were like, oh yeah, sure, I believe in the superior race, go ahead and boink me and take the baby for the good of the white man, or whatever.
I don't think the women were eugenicists, and based on what I have seen from Dr. Ralston and his belief in it, I don't think that he would have talked to them. I think he would have had these relations, not relationships, but relations with these women, and just tracked it. Like Dagmar says, he was like, oh, this woman claims that she's on her time of month, so I should sleep with her in about 6 days. Like, really, really being a scientist about it and not a father about it, which you can see he's not really a father figure to these other any of the children. You know, he doesn't come in to discipline them. He doesn't come in to talk to them. He just kind of proselytizes about eugenics, and then that's it. And the only one that really stuck with was Unity, because she's a psychopath.
He's a eugenist scientist first and foremost.
Yes.
I'm kind of glad for this reveal, right? That he was such a scientist about it, and Dagmar found all his notes, because this entire time, like, my one big hang up throughout most of the book as I was reading it was just like, where did these kids come from? Was this like an Umbrella Academy situation? Like, or was it just like, because it was just so mind-boggling to think 6 mothers at the exact same time have, you know, fatherless children, and Dr. Ralston just happens to sweep in and pick them up. And so, like, this makes perfect sense. I also need to talk about my stupidity, because when we first get the list of dates and names and locations, I didn't realize it was location name. I thought it was surname, first name. So this entire time, I'm like, damn, there are 3 people on this list with the last name London. What is going on?
That's the London triplets, you know? He was like, it's a 3-for-1 deal.
Oh my god.
I don't want to toot my horn, but when it came out that he had 6 adopted children, or I was just like, there's no way that this single man adopted all these children out of the kindness of his own heart.
Yeah.
I said, he has something to do with each and every one of you, of them. I think he's the dad. And then, like, throughout the book, I'm like, well, maybe he's not, because I don't know. It's just, like, 6 kids, you know?
Yeah.
And so I doubted myself. And I was just like, and then it was, I was like, oh, I knew it, and I should have just stuck with it.
It's also really weird when he, like, reveals it to Dagmar that he brought 6 babies home with him. And he's like, oh, come over to my house for tea. By the way, I have 6 babies, and you have to take care of all of them. She's like, hey, what, excuse me? You're like, what?
Exactly. And no single man is going to adopt 6 children out of the kindness of their own heart.
Exactly. He adopted them as part of an experiment. At the very least, I thought that he adopted them as part of an experiment. And what do you know? I was right. He technically did adopt them as part of an experiment. But yeah, like, that was crazy. Oh my god. And more in Dagmar's letters come out, you know, that she also suspected Clara. And there's a section where she's talking about, she's like, oh, Clara, when we woke up, she's talking about the day that the murder happened, and when we woke up, Clara was missing, you know, and I'd been watching Clara, and then she realizes that Clara had been telling her who to actually suspect, and her eyes always turned in the same strange direction at the table, to Unity, good, sweet Unity, dutifully eating her mushy peas and nut loaf, which is disgusting. And that's when she describes, you know, going to the writing desk and finding all the drugs and all of the writing on it. You know, Unity documented all of these things, which is not something that Unity tells us, but something that Dagmar finds. And so it's like, okay, Unity is just like her father, but more extreme. We learn that Aunt Dagmar kills herself and takes Unity with her.
Good for Dagmar.
Yeah.
For Dagmar.
Because she takes a thermos of hot cider and morphine.
Yes.
She will be sleepy, my child, and I will lead her. I cannot abide a monster to live, and a mother cannot kill her child and survive.
Yep.
That entire paragraph was so intense.
It brought it back to the character of Dagmar, right? Because she views herself more than just an aunt to these children, and she cares for them, and she wants to raise them properly and for them to grow and prosper, but she can't forgive this. Like, she's like, no, this has to be punished, and there's only one way to take you down. And the admittance that, like, she's also going to go herself because
she can't live with herself.
She could not live with herself because she still sees Unity as her child. And this was such a difficult decision for her to make. And, like, she's like, I'm leaving now and it's going to be posted. So you're going to get this after I've done it.
Like, it still gives me chills.
Yeah.
A detail that really stood out to me in her letter as well was when Dagmar gets told, make sure there's dinner for the children, and she goes to the cooks and was like, just prepare all of the things they shouldn't have.
Yep.
They need the comfort right now. And her weakness after finding out that Clara died, she's laying on the couch. She feels weak and she doesn't know how much time has passed. 15 minutes, an hour, Dagmar, I am invisible at the best of times, and these were the worst. Yep. So she's just sort of laying there invisible to the entire house, which also kind of comes into play because in the Unity chapters, she also mentions, someone was watching, someone was listening, but never names them. And then we find out it was Dagmar the entire time who overheard Unity confess to her dad. And, she wasn't seen. She was invisible, which just, it was throughout like her entire thing. She wasn't thought of as much more than Aunt Dagmar, even though she thought of herself as their mother.
Yeah. Also, like, I mean, it's not, good. The writing is good. I'm not like, everybody was murdered. Like, I want to go back to where Unity kills Clara, and they have this conversation, and Unity's kind of obsession with Clara and bitterness toward her comes out in some of these lines, where she starts to say that Clara was jealous of her because she'd done it. Clara might be mad that Unity had done the job first. Perhaps she might congratulate her. That was most likely. She would be jealous. Clara jealous of her. It was so delicious to think about. Perfect Clara, Olympic Clara, dancer Clara, bested by bookish Unity, the one with the power and self-control. And like that part is, all of Unity's chapters are chilling after you find out that she murdered Max. And Clara comes up to yell at her. She said, "What did you give us? Why were we sleeping?" "Oh, I just gave you a little Verona. It didn't do you any harm." She's like, "Oh, and you killed him." And Unity did not reply, though she was proud of her actions. She also could not voice them, which is funny because later on she's going to voice them. She goes to her father and very proudly confesses, which is something else I want to go find the section for.
Yes.
And Unity's just like, "So what now?" And Clara continues up the stairs. She's like, "What now, Clara?" She's like, "Well, I've been watching you, and I saw how you were looking at him, and I wasn't sure what you would do, but as soon as Victory said he was gone, I knew. The water, he can't swim. No one would question it. We all slept, and you put him in the water." And then Unity says, "Someone had to do something." It wasn't even that he had no self-control. He wasn't even trying. You know better than anyone. He hit you. I know that's why you pushed him. You were trying to make him learn. You have to understand. Understand? Father deserves better. You know what? He's always telling us we have to be strong, do the things that are hard. Clara outright, she's like, "You're a monster." What is going on? And then Clara is still reeling from the Veronal, so she's like wobbly, a little drunk, and she rushes forward to attack Unity, and Unity reaches for one of the chairs, swings around, hits her, and she falls to the cement patio.
Do you think Unity was so mad that Clara was not jealous of her?
Yeah. I think she fully expects to be praised here.
And she didn't get any praise from her father nor Clara.
Mm-mm. Yeah. And these are two people that she holds in such high esteem.
Just got, and all she got from her father was just, cold, exhausted acceptance and sweeping everything under the rug. Making up the report, washing away the blood, destroying the rest of the patio to get it fixed, and then all of them never coming back to Ralston for the rest of their lives except for Benjamin.
Yeah,
and And poor Faye, who I wonder if she knew about the whole eugenics thing and like how Philip got to have all the kids and bring them home, or if she just genuinely believed that he had adopted these six seemingly orphans.
Oh yeah, that's another part in Dagmar's letter when she talks about Faye screaming over Max's body,
Mm-hmm.
and the shrieking sound of a mother losing her child, and that's another very haunting scene. Oh.
Having to be held back from throwing herself over the edge of the staircase so that she could get down there faster to him.
Mm-hmm.
Really feel that there were other people in the house, whether it be Faye or the maids or something, that noticed the similarities of the kids and the father. And anytime that someone spoke up, they either went missing, they went, on vacation or whatever. And maybe because Faye was his wife, he was like, you're going to shut your mouth because you have nowhere to go. You can't go back on stage with a kid.
Yeah, I imagine that he absolutely excised that kind of power over everyone, because he did to Dagmar, and
yeah.
If you're going to do that to your own sister, you would definitely do that to your wife, and that's also, pretty par for the course in 1932. And the way that he looks at the girl children is definitely not the way that he looks at the boy children, right? The boy, he's like, oh, you should be athletic, you should all be doctors, blah, 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 blah. And the girls, he's like, well, I'm glad that one of you swims very well, and you're so bookish, and that's nice.
Yeah.
I don't believe that he holds women in high esteem. It is absolutely something that he would be like, well, you can't go back on stage. And at the same time, that's also really weird because he strikes me as somebody who would really appreciate a trophy wife starlet, and would put her back to work after she had a child, but it's a different thing.
I think he appreciates that he has this trophy wife who was a starlet, but I think he's one of those guys who has I don't want anyone else to look at her too closely. I want people to admire her, but I also don't want them to admire her too much because she's mine.
Yeah.
And especially because, for that time, that's, the outlook on women and women's roles, like that's par for the course, par for the time. And then he's a eugenist on top of it. So that's even more so ingrained.
Yeah.
And again, if she said anything like, oh, hey, I noticed these similarities between all the kids. Well, you can't have your own bank account. You can't have any of the money, So if you want a nice life, if you want this nice, the life you're used to living now, guess what? You're going to have to shut up.
I wonder if... Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go
I was just saying, I wonder if Philip was upset that she had so much agency prior to their marriage because, she was a starlet, she was an actress, she was well-known and rich and, established in her career. And I'm pretty sure Clara, when we were first introduced to the family, at some point mentions Faye doesn't go back to the stage. She doesn't act anymore. And he maybe he took that away from her. Maybe he was like, oh, you're a married woman now. You can't go out and be acting, and you can't go out and do frivolous things like have a career and make more money than me or something.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because I mean, as someone who thinks he's far superior, he's definitely going to have those thoughts. And then because she is a pretty young, talented, woman who everyone knows, or at least, a good amount of people know, that's the trophy right there. And of course he's going to squirrel it away. She doesn't leave the house. They all don't leave the house unless they're going back to their main house.
Yeah. Because Morning House is the summer house, and then they go back somewhere, I believe it was New York, and then the kids are all off at school wherever they go.
Yeah, all the different boarding schools, I think.
Yeah, I found the scene where she comes to her father, by the way.
But real quick, I just don't know, like, it's never mentioned if Faye is a socialite and goes out and does all these charities and hosts all these, gatherings or anything like that. We don't know. Yeah, no, we don't get a lot of Faye. Faye's another one. No.
That she kind of just blends into the setting, but I think she's also important because she's Max's mother, and there is this contrast between her and Dagmar, because Dagmar is ever present and kind of just not very strict, but at least portrayed as very strict, where Faye is just kind of like, I made a child, and I'm pretty.
It takes Dagmar being like, I have to confront them. You have to do something about Max. This is unacceptable at this point. And even then, she very barely acquiesced, if only because I think Philip finally said, like, yeah, okay.
I want to talk about this scene when Unity goes to her father. Because specifically, Unity waits for her father to come to her, and he doesn't come. And she's like, clearly, he would figure it out that it's me, and I've done what's necessary. And he doesn't come, so she gets very upset. She's like, oh, well, I guess he's busy, but I'll knock on his office. And she goes in, and he's like, Unity, Clara is dead. And she just goes, I know! Like,
psychopathic behavior, Jesus Christ.
Yes, I know. It's very casually, yes. And she's like, I came to tell you something. And he says, I wish you would not, but I have to. You realize what I did, don't you? The house was asleep all day. It was not natural. Veronal, he repeated. That does explain things. And then she goes, I'm sorry about that, but it was necessary. I was very careful about the dosages. I studied them from your books. I was extremely precise as much as I could be. The dosage anyone took likely never exceeded 25 grains. And she goes on and she tells him, and he's listening, and she expects him to correct her, and he doesn't. She's expecting praise. And all he finally asks her is, did anyone else see you? Because then he goes and he covers it all up. She even says, like, I thought you were going to do it. I thought so many times that you were going to do it, and you just didn't. And it just...
I wonder how that made him feel. Like, I thought you were going to do it, and you weren't good enough to do it.
Yeah.
Coming from a little girl.
Not only a little girl, but his little girl, and the only one that resonates with his feelings on eugenics. I think this is an unfortunate twisting moment for Dr. Ralston, where he realizes the error of his way, or at the very least begins to realize the error of his ways in believing in the eugenics movement, because of where Unity takes it.
I don't think so. Maybe he realizes his mistake in teaching a woman about eugenics.
Ooh.
I don't think he regrets his decision in being into eugenics.
Yeah.
Maybe he doesn't think women can handle it. Because
he argues about it with Victory, who was saying, like, I don't believe eugenics is a good thing. I think it's, you know, it's a poor look on life. It's a poor look on science and race.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, you don't know enough. Come to this eugenics convention, and you'll get to hear some more knowledgeable men talk about it, essentially. And I feel like maybe he recognizes he went wrong with the kids, but I don't think he ever really would have denounced his eugenics. I think that was too ingrained in him, and that was too much of what he believed in all his life. You know, even with seeing Unity turn out the way she did.
I disagree. I think that this moment, he does have this, like, because she explains it to him in the language of eugenics and in science, right? She's like, well, I learned it from your books and your teachings, and this is what they amount to. And I don't know that it's in this moment, because when he talks to her, he doesn't talk to her like, you don't know what you're doing. You know, he doesn't note what she has done. He just turns around and he's like, we're going to say that Max drowned by accident and that Clara jumped from the, he's immediately in protect my child, don't send my child to jail mode.
I think we will never really kind of get to find out, just because by the way that Dagmar talks about the family's death, she lists Philip's death first. She says, or not Dagmar. Benjamin mentions that father died first of heartbreak.
Yes.
I think he didn't live long after their deaths. I don't know if he even would have had the time to reconsider and really think about it.
Yeah, that's another point that I feel backs up that he had a change of heart on his worldview there, is because he died of a broken heart. Two of his children are gone because of someone believing they were making the world a better place by removing the weak link.
That makes sense.
Again, I mean, I will, like Maggie said, we'll never know because we don't have that aspect. But I think maybe you can also say he died of a broken heart because he lost Max because a woman took eugenics the wrong way.
I don't see that in the rest of the book. I absolutely do see that, where he talks to, especially his girl children, in that scene that Maggie cited with Victory, where he's like, you just don't know. But I think this turned him. But you're right, we won't know unless someone writes an entire book about the Ralstons, Maureen. Like, I want to read. I just want to read the Ralstons.
I would love a whole book about Dagmar's life.
Yes. I think they really came off the page. They really did very well. And then now we can move to chapter 28.
Yes. My whole thing with chapter 28 is the sort of surprising turn that Marlowe and Ricky's relationship sort of turned, because, the entire time Marlowe was thinking, oh, I'm broken up, I'm heartbroken, and then there's this pretty girl here who's paying attention to me and is mysterious and cool, and I'm infatuated, and there's a few times where she thinks they're gonna kiss, and in 28 they were like leaning towards each other, and we solved a crime, 2 crimes, maybe 6 crimes, but they're leaning in, and then Ricky's like, wait, you should call Aquila. And I'm like, but I'm rooting for the 2 of you. Why can't you kiss?
But then she calls this chapter.
Oh my god, it was different.
First, I want to echo something that Katie pointed out in our first discussion of this, in that yes, Ricky and Marlowe absolutely have chemistry, but Marlowe looks at every girl and describes her sexually.
It's the yearning of the gaze.
It is the yearning of the gaze, but she is definitely like, oh man, my girlfriend broke up with, ooh, shiny. Oh, she's out of my sight. Ooh, this one.
I mean, she's also a young teenaged girl. Like she's got that hormone level.
Yeah. We also discussed our own teenage selves and the craziness of, liking somebody new almost every day. And so like we didn't front on Marlowe too hard, but it is something to make fun of her for, just as all of my friends made fun of me for it. It's only fair.
Yeah.
But I will say go Riki for being like, hey, why don't you figure out your relationship first with this other girl, because I'd feel bad.
My favorite thing was where Ricky is talking, is interrogating Marla, like, what did she say? What were her exact words? And she's like, oh, she just said she got another job. She wants to save up for a keyboard. And Ricky's just like, do you ever think that maybe she just meant that literally and not as a breakup method?
The question of did it ever occur to you just rings true through this entire book.
But did it ever occur to Marlowe that just because you found a tooth doesn't mean there was a murder?
Yes.
My favorite thing is after she talks to Aquila, they clear it all up that it was just a misunderstanding and she wasn't actually breaking up with Marlowe. And she says, Aquila says, you were in shock. I've been waiting for you to talk to me for weeks, and then you called last night talking about lipstick. And Marlowe goes, oh, that. I found a tooth. That was in case I died. I didn't. It's fine. And Aquila's just like, what?
Right? And
I had to put the book down. I was laughing so hard.
There's also like, oh, Marlowe, are you okay? Was there a fire?
And then her immediate response, it wasn't me.
It wasn't me. It wasn't But yes, and we complained about this about Marlowe up front. because she's like, oh man, she broke up with me, and we're like, but she didn't outright say that she broke up with you. But I also have so much respect for Riki for not just being a creep and moving in. She's like, no, you've been walking around like a little lost puppy, and you clearly still want this girl. You're still attracted to her. Like, you love her. Just call her. And Marlowe's like hesitant about it. She's like, but our chemistry. And I thought this was a really great, healthy thing to do.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad. Yeah, I'm really glad that it was shown here, not only for, not being a creep and moving in on someone who's clearly not over the last person they were with, but also communication. Because so much of this, like, if people just talked, a lot of problems would have been resolved, right? If Liani and Van talked to each other, they'd realize April was, spreading rumors. The same thing with, like, Tom and Chris and everybody else. And if people just talked to Dr. Henson, they'd have realized she's not really, like, recording other houses. She's recording things in the house. And
maybe Riki learned that from, not communicating with Liani and instead going and trying to seduce Chris. Instead of saying, hey, your boyfriend is sleeping with tourists, and maybe we can work together so I can show you proof, so here's my idea. And instead of doing that, she just went and did it, and Chris turned it around on her.
Yeah. There's also a moment there that, like, instead of just going up to her friend, who was her close friend, and being like, listen, I saw Chris with another girl, she immediately goes, I'm going to record him sleeping with me so I can show Liani that he's cheating on her.
I'm sure she wanted to record sleeping together.
No, I think it was just flirtation.
Yeah, no, it was the flirtation, but it was like she wanted to show the intent of doing that.
Yes.
And it was, I felt that was weird, that you wouldn't just be like, hey, I saw this. Her immediate jump was, I'm going to trap him and record this and show him coming on to me after I make advances.
I think it's just because she wanted to have that physical, tangible proof instead of just her word, because around this time she was still kind of on the outskirts of the group, before, the blow up of,
of
you tried to sleep with my boyfriend and yeah.
But that's still, like, weird to me that you wouldn't just say something first. That she didn't try to communicate that.
I think that's maybe why she said something to Marlowe, because she learned from that.
Yes.
I mean, also just teenagers are dumb. They never think things through.
It's true. Been there, done that. Still a teenager in my heart.
And if teenagers didn't do stupid things and miscommunicate, would we ever even have YA books at this point?
Yo. Miscommunication is key in storytelling. Especially in, like, YA. I think most of the tension comes from people just not talking and doing their best to handle things on their own. But, yeah.
Happens in a lot of books all over the genres.
Yeah.
Yeah. Grievous miscommunication is difficult to swallow, but, like...
Or malicious miscommunication, as in fantasy. With your bullshit prophecies.
It's just, it's nice to see this sort of can be explained as just being a young, stupid idiot who doesn't, think things through, and then therefore growing from it. As opposed to just, we're not going to talk because reason.
Yeah.
But I guess that brings us to the epilogue.
Yeah, the epilogue was a nice way to wrap all that up, that Riki and Aquila do meet because Marlowe comes up to be like, this is my girlfriend, and everybody gets to talk to each other and meet her, and there ultimately is closure. It's not just that Riki was like, oh my god, girl, you girlfriend, and then we never really find out what happened there. They come back, and Marlowe's like, oh, are you gonna make this weird? She's like, have you met me? I'm glad, like, everything got resolved. There's really nothing up in the air.
I do like the part where immediately after that conversation, Ricky's like, "No, yeah, I've seen her. She's hot. I understand. I don't want to hate her. She seems really nice."
Yeah.
And she has a nice hot bottom.
A nice hot bottom. I do love, like, and the very end of it is her beginning to tell the story of, when they met and she's getting the candle and Aquila likes the smell of petrichor. So it's like, it's nice. It tied up really nice. It echoed the things that it needed to echo, and there all this beautifulness along the timelines and the framing of the story. I really, really loved it. I think I would put it on my shelf as something to give people if they were looking to write YA mystery.
Mm-hmm. Always recommend Maureen Johnson for that. She's killer in the pun intended in the murder mystery genre. I did like that it kind of came full circle, and it's kind of insinuated that the entire book is just the podcast of them retelling what happened.
Yeah.
Especially because Ricky's like, I really want to intersperse it with some information about the Ralstons in between what's happening in the present. I'm like, I see what you did there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Then, any final words from anybody before we close out our discussion on Death at Mourning House?
This entire time, I kept misreading the title of mourning instead of day, but as grief. So it was mourning with a U in my brain the entire time I was reading. I'd read the title.
I had the same issue.
So did I. That's a wrap on this episode of Booked All Night and our discussion on Death at Mourning House by Maureen Johnson. Be sure to leave a review of the show, subscribe, and share the episode. We're just a small corner of the internet, and every little bit helps. And if you want more books and more book friends, then visit the link in our show notes to join our Discord channel, where we'll have updates, let you sit in on author interviews, and run all of our giveaways. Booked All Night is produced by the one, the only, Mr. Rob Cook. Our next discussion will be This Fatal Kiss by Alicia Jasinska, and will air in September. Until next time, my little Libernauts, this is Jessica Mary signing off and reminding you all to stay booked all night.